Alright, so welcome back to Maya here, ladies and gentlemen. And let's go ahead and retopologize our mesh. Now, we're only going to be retopologizing, I'm only going to record retopologizing the eye part here, simply because this way we can go ahead and actually maximize, our learning potential inside of Maya here, and it's going to make it easier for me to go ahead and cover the rest of the modeling parts. So as you can see, I'm using Next for Maya here to go ahead and retopologize my model, and this is going to allow me to go ahead and draw on top of my mesh, so it's just much easier to go ahead and get all that retopology done. So I'm just going to go ahead and move this off screen real quick. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and select my model that I've decimated inside of ZBrush and brought back into Maya, and I'm just going to make it a constraint so that I can actually draw on the mesh. And let's just go here and start drawing out some of our points, and you can see right off the bat where the input piece here is sort of in a bad area on the mesh, but that's okay. If you do stuff like that, that'll just show to people that you're willing to go that extra mile to retopologize things that aren't necessarily easy, and to model things that aren't necessarily easy. So you really have to challenge yourself as a modeler to really make yourself better. So let's just go ahead here and just draw on our mesh real quick, and I'm just trying to draw in spots here where I know the mesh is going to work, and I just want to try to get this retopologized out somewhat quick. There's definitely a lot of easier ways to go ahead and retopologize, but Next for me it really works in a way that it's fairly simple and fairly straightforward here. So as long as we draw this correctly, we aren't necessarily going to have that much of a problem. And I'm just looking there just to make sure that that's taking into consideration that the mesh is actually working properly and sitting on top of the decimated mesh correctly. You can see here, I'll have to draw another line here, and I'm just trying to double check and make sure that I'm drawing the mesh correctly. And this will just take a little bit of time to really go ahead and get this pretty much cranked out as well as you possibly can. It shouldn't necessarily be that difficult to go ahead and retopologize your mesh, but as long as you have something that's fairly straightforward to go ahead and do, you really shouldn't be able to have much of a problem going ahead and actually getting it all done. So let's just go ahead and continue to draw out our mesh here, just making sure that I draw this in the sort of the same way that I'm doing the front here. I want to go ahead and draw the back the same way, just so we can keep an even flow of edges. For what is actually inside of the circle here, I'm not going to do this like in the beginning of the retopology process, because I want to make sure that I get the entire body mesh basically blocked out first, or the main part of the mesh actually blocked out first, and trying to keep my topology as as even as possible. As low as possible isn't necessarily the main priority here, simply because we're just simply going to be rendering this. We aren't necessarily going to be rigging it or anything, and so I don't really have to worry about how clean my geometry is, or how drawn out my geometry is for this mesh. We're just basically going to be adding a smooth control to it, or a smooth node to it, so that we can have a smooth whenever we go to render this. The main function and the main key here is just really to go ahead and get this blocked out properly. So I'll just continue to go ahead and draw this out. And I'm sorry about that anti-virus spam warning there, and it must be my recorder, or the software that I'm using to go ahead and record my tutorial here. So we'll just continue to go ahead and block out here. I'll just go ahead and turn that off just so that it doesn't come back up, because that would actually get fairly annoying in terms of watching that in the video. So this just takes a little bit of time to get drawn out right, a little bit of patience. It's basically like drawing a game mesh. It shouldn't really be frustrating, but as long as you sort of just take your time and use a little bit of patience, you should be able to get this all done fairly quickly. General overview of Next for Maya. I mean, it's an invaluable tool. I couldn't really put a price on it. Besides ZBrush, it's probably the best investment that I've ever made for my CG. Simply because it makes it just so much easier to go ahead and get everything done that you want, and you can do it in a quick way. There really isn't too much of a problem to get everything done. So I'm just going to go ahead and change the color of the drawn out mesh so that you guys can see it a little bit better here. I'm sort of one of those guys that really likes clean topology and even flow, and if it isn't even flow, it'll really, let's just say, bother me. Really OCD-ish, and so you just have to think to yourself, you really want to make it easier on yourself. You don't want to, let's say, make it a headache for yourself to, whether it be UVmap or rig. You want to keep that process as simple as possible, because in the end, the faster and better you can get stuff out, then the ultimate result is going to be better. And so you really want to take into consideration of trying to really make it easier on yourself, and the easiest as possible as you can on yourself. Just doesn't make sense to turn everything into, say, like an astrophysics problem or a rocket science problem. Just try to keep it simple and get stuff done correctly. You can see here on the edge where it's not necessarily conforming to the mesh, and I'll fix that here in a little bit whenever I complete the topology. But for right now, I'm just trying to basically block out the main pieces here, and I'll just tend to shape and change the vertices here a little bit, just trying to keep this as clean as I can. I can't stress that enough. I mean, you really want clean topology. You don't want topology that's basically like a garbage pile. I've seen so many people, sort of redraw their meshes and their topology to make it look like it's been thrown together like, somebody was like blind or something. And you really don't want to do that. You want to try to keep it as clean as you possibly can. That's actually looking, fairly decent so far, so let's go ahead and just start drawing on the other side here. I know I've actually drawn that hole on the in an area on the mesh that it's going to definitely be complex to get perfect, but I'm one of those guys that really strives to get everything to look the way that I want it to look, and to look, I don't really want to say perfect, because nothing is perfect. You just want to try to keep those flaws to the most minimum amount possible, and just go from there. Okay, so let's just try to get this blocked out right, and that looks fine there. Okay, so I'm just going to try and trace this around here, just making sure that I'm going to match up on the other side as well. And that looks good, so I'll just draw in some extra edge loops here. Same thing here on the side, and you can see where this is a fairly complex mesh as well. It's not necessarily the, I think I drew that wrong. Let me just take a look. Yeah, not necessarily the easiest mesh to go ahead and retopologize. It's somewhat of a complex shape. It's looking pretty good right there. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead here and select some vertices. And I think I was selecting the vertice faces there. Let's go ahead and select the verts here. Just deselect the ones that I don't want selected. And trying to flatten them out is probably going to be a bad idea because we have that inserted mesh there. So let's go back into my quad draw function here and just continue to draw out the rest of the piece of the mesh here. Just trying to stay as even as I possibly can. And I'm just thinking to myself, you know, you just want to, like on the sides here, where you can see where it's, you know, sort of roundish. The easiest way to go ahead and do it, like you can see, is just draw out enough edge loops so that you know it's going to conform to the mesh correctly. You can always remove later on if you have to, but I'm not necessarily worrying about that right now because I know that we're not rigging this, and this is mainly going to be a portrait piece, so we don't necessarily have to worry about the polygons too much. Yeah, you want it to render in a timely manner. You definitely don't want to be waiting 12 hours for a render, especially on a portrait piece, because that might, you know, be a little bit too long. But you just, you know, want to make sure that it's conforming to the mesh and you keep the look that you're really after. And I know this is a little bit boring to, you know, sort of watch me do retopology, but you know, it's such a necessary progress or process that it's really invaluable to go ahead and watch and learn how to do it correctly. You know, animation meshes are a little bit different than, say, you know, a portrait piece, simply because those animation meshes tend to get retopologized completely and like 100%. So you're basically going to be tracing over your sculpt. But for this, I mean, yeah, we're doing the sort of the same thing, but we sort of aren't, because we only really captured the detail of the alphas that we used to go ahead and detail out our mesh. And it's sort of basic to go ahead and retopologize that, because it was, you know, simply just a circular shape, and there really isn't any complexity to it. So we just want to make sure that we sort of get this all blocked out fine here. So let's come back up here to the top, start redrawing my mesh again. Just basically in the same format that we have been doing here, just trying to keep this as even as I possibly can. And this just takes a little bit of time to go ahead and get, you know, pretty much done correctly. And I know there's a lot of different tools out there that'll allow you to, you know, sort of do retopology in a quick format, whether it be topo, gun, as you can see next for Maya here. 3D Code also offers a wonderful solution for doing retopology. But for me, you know, I use Maya so much and ZBrush so much that it made sense for me to actually own Next. So let's go ahead and just draw this out here. It's such a wonderful tool. I can't really even put into words how good it is to actually get your meshes retopologized, even though I'm sort of doing it by hand. There'll probably be in the future, you know, an easier way to go ahead and do retopology, but for right now, this is probably the best solution. And you can see where I'm just drawing out the trying to match that, you know, layout correctly here. You can see that I'm accidentally adding an extra edge loop or two here and there, and that's just the way that Nex's shortcuts actually work inside of Maya. Where you can see you can just hold down shift and actually draw out an edge loop fairly quickly. Works very similar to the insert edge loop tool inside of Maya. Okay, so let's go ahead and select these vertices on the edge here, and hopefully this won't go in to the back here. So let's just grab these, and I just want to try to even these out, see what this does. Yeah, that's good. Just trying to conform to the mesh correctly. And I'm just trying to draw it out in a way that, you know, my topology looks clean and it's straight and there's no real kinks in the geometry, because I definitely don't want to have like pinching or seams whenever I go to render. Because if you have pinching seams and stuff when you render, then it's just not going to be what it's supposed to be. I know this is a very monotonous, sort of boring thing to actually go ahead and do, but that's alright. Just take your time and you'll get it done quickly and get it done in a way that, you know, it works. Just trying to adjust these edges a little bit more, making sure that the flow is even here. You can always clean up your edges later if you need to. And I knew the retopology here would actually take a while, simply because we are sort of drawing it all out by hand, and that's just the way it is. Okay, so now we can, looks like we're almost done here, so we just draw the last couple just to match up here properly. Okay, we'll go ahead and select these vertices and we'll just go ahead and even these out. I think that actually went inside the mesh, yeah, as you can see there. So I'll just go back to my quad draw, just even it out by hand. And we'll just go ahead here and continually get these blocked out here, making sure that we also draw the front side as well as the back side so that we can work down the mesh together. And then we'll just, you know, line these up whenever we go to get these done there. And that's actually not looking too bad right now. It's looking pretty good. I'll have to do a little bit of cleanup and stuff, you know, as you can see, but for the most part I want to just try to get this done real quick, just so we can maximize, you know, learning the rest of what I want to go ahead and record here. And I'll go ahead and clean those edges up. Just trying to make this, you know, clean looking and nice topology as I can, even though we aren't necessarily going to be UV mapping this, because Bender doesn't quote unquote have an actual texture to him. He would basically just have a shader to him. And I'm just going from some of the lines in the cartoon where he, definitely says, I don't want to swear on the video, but bite my shiny blank. And so we really don't necessarily have to, let's just say, UV map them. It's mainly just going to be a lot of shader work. Okay, so it looks pretty good there. Pretty good there. And I'm just going to go ahead and insert a couple extra edge loops here just so that it's going to maintain its shape a little bit better here. And I'm also going to add one here. Go ahead and fix this edge piece here. Just making sure that I'm going to do the easier way here. Just grab all the vertices on the edge and I'll just scale them together. Oh, selected one too many there. Okay, just go ahead and move that back. Bring out our quad tool. Just add our edge loops for that. Just making sure that I'm going to get those rounded edges as perfect as I can here. Okay, and the way I want to go ahead and do this inner circle here is also going to work a little bit with the next lesson where we're going to do the body as well. Not the body's retopology, but creating these inserts here. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and just simply extrude on this. Okay, and I don't know if you can see where that's actually going in here. I'm just going to go ahead and x-ray that, and I'll go ahead and turn on my wireframe, and I'm just going to extrude this in just to where I know that it's going to conform to the mesh. Come back to my quad draw tool here and just draw out some edge loops that I know I'm going to need for whenever I go ahead and create this extra piece here on the mesh. Just trying to make sure that that's actually going to work properly, and that looks like it. So let me go ahead and add an edge loop inside here just so that this is going to conform properly. Okay, and we will go ahead here and grab our border edge in the front. Let's go ahead and extrude this in, which probably isn't going to work that well simply because of the inner mesh here. So I'm going to have to do this in another file lesson, but you can see where for the most part we have our mesh completely retopologized, at least for the eyes here. And in the next lesson we'll go ahead and we'll come back and then we'll just continue to work on the eyepiece here so that we can go ahead and basically just extrude in here and just make sure that this is going to conform to the mesh. Same thing here on the back. I mean, I can probably go ahead and do this now. Just go ahead and sort of just extrude in so that you can see where this is not necessarily going to conform to the mesh that I want it inside of my, because next is let's just say conforming to the inner part of the mesh, and so I'll just have to go ahead and turn next off, and then we'll come back in the next lesson and continue to work on what is going to be our eyepiece here, and we'll go ahead and block out the rest of the detail for this, and we'll start working on the body and the other details of Bender here. So come on back.